Let me just say something right out of the gate that honestly, most people are kind of terrified to say out loud. The education system, yeah, it completely failed to prepare you for actual life. I mean, really think about it. You sat in classrooms for what, 15, maybe 20 years of your life? You dragged yourself out of bed early, crammed a bunch of information in your head, and passed your exams. And now, well, if you're feeling a bit lost, confused, or just deeply unfulfilled, I want you to know something right now, and I mean, really hear this. That is not your failure. In this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly why that heavy feeling of being totally unprepared is actually a massive systemic design flaw. Okay, let's dive into this. Did school actually prepare you for life? When we look back at all those years stuck in formal schooling, were you ever, actually taught how to handle a failing relationship? Or were you given a masterclass on how to manage stress when everything around you is just completely falling apart? Did anyone sit you down and teach you how to bounce back from real-world failure? No, they just taught us how to sit quietly, memorize a thick textbook, and then completely brain dump that exact same info the literal second the exam was over. And here is the brutal truth we absolutely have to confront. You were trained, you were not educated. Seriously, think about the basic rules you absorbed day in and day out. Sit down, stay quiet, follow the instructions, do not question authority. Does that sound a little too familiar? Because guys, that's not education. That is compliance training. The system didn't teach you how to think dynamically or critically. It only trained you how to obey implicitly. So we end up with this massive, glaring mismatch. You were trained for this highly controlled path, a safe job, basically by learning to just shut up and follow the rules. But here's the kicker. The real world doesn't reward unquestioning obedience. It rewards bold creativity. It rewards courage, complex problem solving, and taking big leaps of faith. But absolutely nobody in that classroom was showing you how to take a real creative risk, were they? Instead, we were all sold this perfectly predictable life timeline. It goes like this: school, then college, then you get a job, and you just stay there until you retire. We were fed the ultimate lie, just study hard, get good grades, and your whole life will be completely set. But what's the actual reality we're seeing right now? We have thousands upon thousands of students holding wildly expensive degrees who are just entirely confused, stuck, and endlessly searching for some kind of purpose. And why? Because the system was built to churn out followers, not independent thinkers. Phase 2. Inside the factory model. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to pull back the curtain on why this system even exists in the first place. Spoiler alert, it wasn't built for your dreams. It was built during the industrial age to pump out obedient workers. And this brilliantly illustrates how the modern schooling system perfectly mirrors an industrial factory. I mean, think about it. Every single person gets the exact same syllabus, taught through the exact same method, with the exact same expectations. Bells literally dictate your physical movement from room to room, exactly like factory shift whistles. Subjects are kept completely separated, and at the end of the assembly line, you are graded, sorted, and stamped like a manufactured product. Everyone is treated identically, completely bulldozing over the fact that some of us are natural leaders, some are builders, and some are deeply, uniquely creative. The underlying message here is actually kind of chilling when it hits you. You were never meant to stand out. You were only ever meant to fit in. The system fundamentally dictates that if you can't just sit still and memorize the textbook, well, then you're simply not smart. It treats anyone who falls outside those rigid factory specs like a defective unit. Let me be super clear about this. That isn't education. That is pure conditioning. You were the product on a massive assembly line. Phase 3. Competing versus learning. Let's shift gears a bit and see how this whole factory mindset warps our adult psychology, because it really trains us on what to think rather than how to think. If you've ever seen the movie Three Idiots, you probably remember this iconic, totally spot-on scene. Life is a race. If you don't run fast, you'll be like a broken egg. That single line perfectly captures the whole ethos of the factory system. In that environment, you aren't actually absorbing knowledge or learning for the joy of it. You are literally just competing with the person sitting at the desk right next to you. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it exposes the total, undeniable mismatch between our own biology and institutional schooling. Our brains naturally learn best through genuine curiosity, repetition mixed with actual understanding and real-life application. But look at what schools do. Rote memorization, immense pressure, and just a totally crippling fear of failure. So what happens? You pass the exam out of sheer terror, sure, but you don't actually build a single usable long-term skill. Phase 4. The financial blind spot. This absolute lack of usable, real-world skills leads us straight to the single biggest, most massive gap left by your 15 to 20 years of schooling: money. As the famous book Rich Dad Poor Dad points out so perfectly, schools teach you to work for money, not how money works. This hits the nail right on the head. This is exactly why so many highly educated, incredibly hardworking people are just completely lost when it comes to true financial independence. They spent 2 decades learning how to be a perfectly obedient employee, but absolutely 0 seconds learning how capital actually functions in the real world. Just think about the absolute survival skills that were completely left off the factory syllabus. Investing, strategic saving, actually building wealth beyond just clocking an hourly salary, and crucially, handling real-world failure. The system entirely ignored the core mechanics of surviving, let alone thriving in the adult world. It's like sending someone to sea without teaching them how to swim. Phase 5. It is not your fault. Let's just take a deep breath here for a second. So the crucial point is, if looking at all those blind spots brings up a lot of anxiety, or if you've been carrying around this heavy weight feeling like you're somehow just behind in life, I want you to truly, deeply absorb this. You are not dumb. You are incredibly capable. You were just never taught the right way. Your intelligence, your creativity, your unique way of seeing the world, none of that is broken. The system failed you. You didn't fail the system. You were simply being judged by the totally flawed metrics of a factory assembly line that honestly had absolutely no idea what to do with your real potential. Which brings us to the biggest, most important question of all. Because the good news is, that factory conditioning, it stops the exact moment you recognize it for what it is. Now that you know, you are not just some product on an assembly line. The power is entirely back in your hands. So how will you choose to truly educate yourself from this day forward? Because your real learning, it starts right now. Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into some seriously powerful source material, a framework called The Unschooling of Winners, a blueprint for life mastery. We're going to completely flip the script on everything you probably thought you knew about traditional success. I mean, we'll even look at exactly why being the absolute worst player on your team might just be the biggest advantage you could ever ask for. Seriously. So if you've ever felt like the path you were told to walk isn't exactly leading where they promised it would, well, you're in exactly the right place. Grab your focus because we're about to unpack the ultimate roadmap to mastering life by essentially unlearning what we were all taught. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the education gap. I want you to think about your own journey for a second here. You know that underlying, almost nagging feeling of frustration? The one where you played by all the rules. You sat at your desk, you memorized the facts, passed the tests, got the good grades, and yet somehow you still feel kind of stuck? It begs the question, if school taught you everything, why are you still figuring life out? Think about that for a second. We spend a massive chunk of our early lives sitting inside a classroom. We're repeatedly told that this system is meticulously preparing us for the real world. But when we finally graduate and step out into that real world, we instantly realize it operates on an entirely different operating system. The traditional system just left out some massive, critical pieces of the puzzle, and frankly, it leaves highly capable people feeling totally lost. Which brings us right into Section 2, redefining real education. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact problem. If traditional schooling missed the mark, what do real-world survival skills actually look like? Let's break down this new curriculum. Traditional school tells you to memorize facts just long enough to regurgitate them onto a piece of paper, right? Real education teaches you how to think. It teaches you how to analyze the incentives behind a decision, look for second and third order consequences, and really challenge the status quo. School tells you the ultimate goal is simply to get a job. Real education, on the other hand, teaches you how money actually works behind the scenes, how to build independent income, leverage assets, and create actual value in the marketplace. And maybe the biggest one here, school conditions you to avoid failure at all costs. You literally get penalized for wrong answers. Real education teaches you how to learn. Information is everywhere now. It's practically free. The ultimate skill today isn't just holding information in your head. It's the ability to acquire new frameworks and learn new things fast. So the absolutely crucial point here is how we view our mistakes. The source material defines failure not as a personal weakness or some character flaw, but simply as data. Let that powerful reframe truly sink in. Think about a scientist in a lab, okay? When an experiment doesn't produce the desired result, the scientist doesn't fall to the floor and declare themselves a failure as a human being. No way. They just view it as a crossed-out variable. They collected data. Every time things don't go according to plan in your life, you haven't failed. You've just successfully collected a brand new data point on what doesn't work. It's immediate, actionable feedback from the real world. It's not a final grade. And that data feeds right into the essential elements of how to live. Think about the core skills that actually dictate your daily success: discipline, emotional control, resilience. This is the real hidden curriculum for life that school completely skipped over. I mean, they never gave you a pop quiz on emotional control during a crisis today. There's no Scantron bubble for keeping your cool when your startup loses its biggest client. But out here in the real world, your resilience and your discipline are tested every single day. These traits are the absolute foundation for handling the inevitable friction of life. Without them, all the memorized facts in the world won't help you navigate a real crisis. All right, let's slow things down just a bit as we move into Section 3, Profiles of Rule Breakers. Now, what's really interesting about this is how we can cluster this social proof into one overwhelming argument. We're going to look at some absolute heavy hitters based on our source material. These are people who recognize the massive gap between school and reality early on and successfully bypass the traditional system. Consider Michael Jordan. Imagine being a young Jordan, walking up to the gym wall, checking the varsity basketball roster, and seeing that your name isn't on it. He was cut. Traditional metrics said he just wasn't good enough. But instead of accepting that grade, he used that crushing failure as pure fuel. You see this exact same pattern everywhere. Elon Musk didn't rely on formal schooling to innovate aerospace. He ravenously read books and built things with his own hands. Steve Jobs famously dropped out of the traditional university system to follow his sheer, unrelenting curiosity. And Cristiano Ronaldo? Experts say he wasn't necessarily the most naturally talented player on day one, but he outworked everyone because he was absolutely the most disciplined. The winning action for all of them was entirely outside the traditional rulebook. Success clearly doesn't require playing by the old rules. As this quote perfectly summarizes, they didn't wait for permission, they created their own path. You have to understand this deep down. You do not need a hall pass to be successful in life. No one is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, it's your turn. You have the power right now to forge your own way. You don't have to wait for someone to sit you down and teach you. You can go out and teach yourself. Stop waiting for the permission slip that is literally never going to come. So let's pivot the narrative from inspiration to pure execution. Welcome to Section 4, Your Blueprint for Winning. Let's move to and see how this builds a highly actionable framework. Let's get right into the exact steps you can take today to completely rewrite your personal system. Step 1, take ownership. You have to stop blaming your circumstances, the economy, or the school system, and start actively building your life. Step 2, build skills. Remember what we said earlier? Specific, high-leverage skills are infinitely greater than degrees on a wall. Pick one, whether that's communication, coding, copywriting, or sales, and obsess over mastering it. Step 3, learn daily. Commit to just 1 hour a day. Now, that might not sound like much, but 1 hour a day is 365 hours a year. To put that into perspective, that is roughly equivalent to 9 full 40-hour work weeks dedicated entirely to your own self-improvement. That compounds into massive growth over time. And finally, step 4, execute. Because acquiring all this knowledge without taking action is, well, it's entirely useless. You have to step into the arena and actually put it into practice. But before you run off to start executing those steps, I need you to understand one immutable truth from our source material. No one is coming to fix your life. That's your job. It's a stark wake-up call. It might sound harsh at first, but it's actually the most liberating realization you'll ever have. The cavalry isn't coming to save the day. You are the cavalry. Once you internalize that, you stop waiting and you start building. Let's bring it home with Section 5, taking control. I want to bring the energy down just a little bit here to something much more intimate. Because while taking ownership is incredibly empowering, suddenly realizing you've spent years playing by the wrong rules, well, it can be a really tough pill to swallow. It can feel discouraging to think about the lost time, but listen to me very carefully. You are not behind. You are not broken. Please understand that. You are just playing a game that was never designed for your personal success. It was designed to create compliant workers, not thriving innovators. You just did what you were told. But the beautiful, incredible thing is, now you know the truth. You can't rewrite your past, but you absolutely have the power to rewrite your operating system right now. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought from the source to really reflect on today. They taught you how to pass exams. Now it's your turn to learn how to win in life. Real education, true life mastery, starts the exact moment you stop waiting to be taught. You have the blueprint, you know the gap, you have the permission to break the rules. So the only question left to ask yourself is, what are you going to learn today?